So I bet when you clicked Fearless Females Voice podcast today, you didn't expect to hear a man's voice. But today it's Akash Rugella, Chandni's fiance, here to put Chandni under the spotlight and talk to us all about Fearless Females, why it started, and our own journey through life as a fearless female. So without further ado, let's dive in. So in typical Fearless Female Voice podcast fashion, what does being a fearless female mean to you?
Well, so this is a question that I ask all my podcast guests, the first question. And how I see it is women go through many challenges in life, and it's how we deal with those challenges which makes us fearless. So how I would define being fearless for me is being able to take risks and really embrace opportunities that come our way. So for me, taking a risk means pretty much entering an area of unknown, or it's almost being exposed to danger. So that's quite a scary concept because you're going into something without really knowing the outcome. So you can outweigh the risks and see what's good and what's bad, but it's doing something for the better. If you believe in something, if you're in a position where you're not happy, then it's all about taking risks and making change. I feel like making change allows you to grow as a person. So for me, that's all a part of being fearless.
So give us an example of what danger means. You said use the word danger, or what sort of danger you're exposing yourself to?
Ooh, that could be anything. So if I think about some of the risks that I've taken, let's say when I go traveling, so I've done a lot of solo travel, so some of the risks there are you're going somewhere. Well, I've done it on my own. It's not really knowing what's going to happen, who you're going to meet. Anything can go wrong. You could get sick, not have anyone there. So that's one. I've moved to, let's say, different cities. So it's almost going somewhere where you don't really know anyone. Again, it's will I make any friends? Will I fit in? Will I be happy? There's all these kind of risks with different elements.
So it's more about stepping into the unknown. Is that right?
Yeah, I'd say so. So stepping into the unknown and really embracing it as well. So it's stepping into the unknown for something that you really believe in, something that you're passionate about, something that you were willing to make a change on.
Yeah. And is this something you feel women in general struggle with, or this is something I listen to and think this is probably across the population, but obviously you're targeting at women. Have you found there to be a gender difference in this, or is it more because you're a woman yourself and there's specific types of scenarios you've been in that have made it more disadvantageous, if that's a word, for a woman?
So I think it's very applicable to anyone. So I agree it's not really gender specific. However, the challenges I'm more talking about for women and things that we specifically go through are things such as sexism or gender diversity within the workplace, or even entering motherhood. They're all challenges and they're all new ways for our life, ways of living our life. So it's very there is a risk element involved. So yeah, that's how I put it as.
Okay, so let's start with the first one you mentioned, the sexism. Can you explain experiences you've had potentially with dealing with sexism, and or even stories you've heard, and what you'd like to see different in an ideal world?
Interesting. So what I can talk about sexism is I've experienced it a little bit in the workplace, funnily enough. So when I'm a chemical engineer, so I studied engineering in university, and then I went on to working in a engineering manufacturing environment. And within the first 3 months of my work, it was a heavily kind of male focused team. So I remember when I walked in on my first day, and there was just about 15 to 20 guys sitting around the table, and I walked in and I was like, oh, hi guys. So it was a bit intimidating at the start anyway. And then as I was moving on to specific projects that I was working on, I was pretty much leading a team of guys, and I was also managing some contractors. And one bit that happened to me, I remember one specific moment where we were at a piece of packaging equipment, and whilst we were there, I was discussing one element of the machine, which was like a sucking head, a sucking unit. So it pretty much just sucks up product and picks it up. And whilst I was there, I was describing the machine, and one of the guys on the team said, oh, I bet you know all about sucking or suction. something along the lines of that. And that was my first kind of exposure to it. And I just froze, and I had little giggles from around the team. So the team was were laughing, and also the contractors were laughing. So it just really threw me off, and I didn't expect that at all. I was expecting a professional environment, so it was very new for me. Luckily, there was another senior member of my team who then stepped in on my behalf. And after that, I just felt really exposed. I just felt vulnerable. So I remember going back to the office and just sitting down and kind of taking in what had happened and thinking, wow, if this is what it's like, I really need to have thicker skin. I need to man up, and I need to voice how I'm feeling and say that's not appropriate, which I didn't really have the confidence to do at that moment in time when it happened.
Have you had an opportunity to stand up for it since?
Yeah, so if there's any other scenarios like that, where, for example, in a work environment specifically where I'm being dismissed or I'm being patronized in a way just because I'm the only girl in the room, I do voice my opinion. So I try and stand up a bit more. It's taken a lot of time for me to get to that position, but I'm just wary that we women need to stand up in situations like that, and it's difficult. It is a challenge, right? So it's just having the confidence and building that as time goes on.
When women are in male-dominated environments, the struggle is often to quote-unquote sit at the table. What have you seen with that? Like, have you found opportunities potentially passed over, or difficulties in voicing an opinion on a strategy, or these sorts of things because you're a woman, especially in a male-dominated environment that engineering is, whereby I don't know, you know all the stats for these.
Yes, I think 11% of the UK engineering population are female. So it was when I started more along the lines of 7. So there's been a bit of improvement in that, which is good. The more education that we're giving to the younger generations coming through about engineering, but it's still heavily male focused. Now, it's not just engineering, so there are other industries and other functions as well, which are more male focused or dominated. So yes, it kind of applies to many different roles.
So do you want to expand on the thing about sitting on the table?
Yeah, sure. So I've experienced that myself. So walking into a room where let's say there is a table, and at the beginning of my career, I remember thinking, I'm just going to sit on the sidelines, because I feel like, so I used to walk into a room and just sit on the side or at the back of the room. And I just subconsciously did that. I didn't even think, I should sit at the table. And at the table were more senior members of the team or of other functions, which again were mainly male. So I just felt a bit intimidated to sit at the table. But what I realized is when I was sitting away from the table, when the discussions were going on and I had a point to make, I felt more reluctant to make that point, and I didn't always make it. So I felt that, they're having a discussion, I don't want to interrupt, or I don't want to give my view. And I always keep that point in my mind. And then when someone else says it, I'm just thinking, I was thinking that. And someone more senior than me has said it. So I was like, I could have actually input and said that piece. So more and more I've been trying to learn about, let's sit at the table. So when I walk into a meeting where there's senior members, let's say it is a male-dominated environment again, I make sure that I sit at the table. There's been times where there hasn't been a seat at the table and it's been on the back of the room, but I just pick it up and put it closer. And even if it means I'm on a second layer away from the table, if it's fully kind of occupied, that's good enough, because for me it feels like then I'm participating as a part of the group, and I feel more welcomed into the discussion, and I feel like I can make my point more. So obviously that's helped the more senior I've got in my roles. So at the start as a graduate, I was just sitting away. I was like, I don't know if I'm going to say the right thing or ask the right questions. But now what I realized is even senior team members will ask silly questions. They may not know everything because they're managing from afar. They may not be the experts. Actually, any question is a good question. So I've got to that mindset as well.
For women who are entering the workforce now, that may not have been exposed to any of the stuff that you're talking about, but they may be going into a place where it's male dominated, what advice could you give them on a personal level?
I'd say firstly, take it in. So when you enter this kind of environment, it may be intimidating. So it definitely was for me. And then it's almost to make connections with these people individually, which I did. And that helped ease me into having discussions and actually fitting in and sitting at the table, let's say, and joining in the meetings. So definitely, that will definitely help with feeling less scared about anything or intimidated. So yeah, I think it's just a mindset. And just go in confident. Go in, you know your stuff, right? You're there for a reason. So just go in and make your mark.
I like that. So we've discussed work and gender inequality in the workplace and potential sexism. Another thing you mentioned around your risk taking, and I think you defined the work you do as almost as a step into the unknown, right? A similar one is you're traveling. So obviously you've been, I don't know how much your listeners know, but you've visited more countries than anyone I know, and a lot of them you've done solo. And some of the stories you have are pretty crazy with regards to, you know, what you've been through or what you've seen and all these sorts of things. Talk to us about solo traveling for women and why it's so important.
Sure. Okay. So traveling is my biggest passion. I started traveling in 2010. So that's when I was 20 years old. And my first ever trip was to Southeast Asia. So I traveled with my friend, and she was then halfway through the trip, she was then going to China. And I thought to myself, I'm already going to be in Southeast Asia, so let me just move from Thailand to Malaysia. And I ended up doing it alone because I thought I don't want to really ask around and see if someone can join me. And when I went to Malaysia, I was scared as hell. Like I remember getting on the plane to Thailand, I was with my friends, everything was fine. But as soon as she left, I felt really nervous. I was like, right, what am I going to do? What is this even like? What if something happens? A whole load of thoughts were in my mind. But I continued on and I was like, let's just see how it goes, right? I love a bit of an adventure. So I was like, let's just see how it goes. And I did my first ever trip, solo trip in Malaysia, and it was incredible. I met so many amazing people. It was such an eye-opening experience. And I loved learning so much about the different cultures there, the different food, the different personality types. I just felt like it was a constant learning. And a bit about me, I love learning. I'm a bit of one of those geeks that just wants to learn everything. So I'm very curious-minded, I'd say. So I remember even when I was in Thailand, like I remember after a night out, most people go home, but I went to, I was just walking around the streets and I remember bumping into a ladyboy. Now that was the first time that I'd actually seen a ladyboy. I was 20, you don't really come across them in the UK. And I was so curious. And I remember she was eating in a restaurant just on the street. So I got some food and I asked if I could sit and talk. And she said, yeah. So I went and sat down and I just asked her a bunch of questions about what's it like being a ladyboy and how do you get started and what was your childhood like? And she was really nice, really open. And from there I was like, right, this is interesting. Like I've learned so much about this that I didn't know before. So with that first ever trip, it just opened my world. And since then I've been traveling every year. And I've been trying to do a solo trip because I feel it has so many benefits. For me especially, I think for women especially as well. And just gives you that next level of independence, your freedom. You're planning everything as to how you want it. You've got no one to look over your shoulder. You are there on your own and you've got to make it through by yourself. So it's almost, you have the confidence, you have the independence, also the resilience, because a lot of things can go wrong. So some of the things which I've done, I always feel like I push myself every time I'm away, because also you don't know anyone there. So it's almost like you're entering somewhere where nobody really knows you. So you can do almost what you want and be how you want to be and how you are. So I've done loads of crazy things that I would never do back home, such as like crossing borders across Central America by foot by myself. There's been like guns being pointed at me from afar. It's just crazy stuff. I've been mugged by a guy in Argentina and then also in Colombia as well. And it was a drug dealer who took my phone. And I remember I'm just like, hey, he took some phone and money. And I remember thinking, I want that back. So I went to actually speak to him. And my Spanish isn't very good. But I was like, screw it, let me try anyway. So I spoke to him in Spanish and somehow got him to give me my phone and my money back. So
oh, really?
Just,
what did you say to him?
I remember, I think I said something like, why did you take it? And he was like, I needed it for drugs. And bear in mind, this was like really loose translation of Spanish. He was speaking to me in Spanish. I was trying to speak Spanish, a bit of English. And I talked about police. And he said, no, please don't call the police. Like, I work locally and I don't want to get fired. I don't want my managers to know, this kind of thing. And eventually we came to a compromise. I said, look, if you give me my stuff back, nobody has to know anything. And that's it, we'll just leave it there. And he agreed. So he came back in like 15 minutes and gave me my stuff back. So I was like, oh, good. It's good.
So he mugged you and then walked off, and you went after him?
Yeah, so it was in a venue. It was like in a hotel, hostel kind of thing. So, yeah.
Interesting. What any other crazy stories? You mentioned the crossing of the borders. What was that about?
So I was in Central America, and I wanted to get from one country to another. So I was by the way, all these trips are backpacking trips. And it was from Nicaragua to Guatemala. And I remember when I was in Nicaragua, I was in a city, and I met like a tour guide, and I wanted some help as to how to cross the border, because I was like, oh, all I probably need to do is just get some transport to the border and cross it, right? And I remember speaking to her, and she was like, oh, actually, you need to take 5 different buses to get you to the border. And then when you're crossing the border, there's 2 different entry points. There may be some people with guns. Just relax and just walk quickly. Don't look at anyone. And I was like, oh my God, I need to make notes on this. So I got her to write this list down of what I need to do. And even that list made me feel anxious. I remember telling my mum, I think, after I did it, because I didn't want to scare her. But it was these 5 buses, of which one of them left you in the middle of nowhere, and then you had to wait for the next bus to arrive on a random road. But the thing is, in Central America, you don't have a schedule of buses or trains or anything. It's just, you don't know if it's delayed or on time. You just have to wait. So I remember I did that with my backpack, and it was quite dodgy, to be honest. But I don't know how I did it. I just felt really like natural, comfortable with it. I was like, yeah, let's do it. Other people have done it. I can do it. So I was like, screw it, let me do it.
How can someone who's never done solo traveling start?
I always say, people ask me this, I always say the best thing to do is just book a flight. And that way you're locked in. And then you can work towards, okay, what do I need to do? Make a plan. And for those who are nervous about it or don't know how to start, once you've booked your flight, I'd probably say, or even before, start talking to people who have done it to get some tips and advice to make you feel more comfortable. So I started writing a blog on travel, giving tips and advice to solo travelers, to females, ways to keep safe. Because when you're abroad, you really need to be vigilant, especially, or depending on which country you're in as well. But it's all about keeping as safe as you can. Now, when you talk to people who have done it, if you're a female, I'd say talk to other girls who have done it, just to get some advice and tips, and that will help build your confidence. Also, you can start by doing something locally. So it's not necessarily let's just go away for 3 months to South America. You can just start with a weekend in Paris or a weekend in the UK on your own, because there's 2 elements of solo travel. So there's the element of independence, freedom, not really having a plan and just kind of going with the flow, and whatever comes at you. But there's also the element of being alone. So that also is a scary concept of thinking, what would you do alone? But little do people know that you're never actually alone unless you want to be. So when you're traveling, or when I'm traveling, I normally stay in hostels and in dorms if I'm by myself. And the amount of people I've met, I can't even count. I can't even think how many. It's hundreds. And you make friends so quickly. So you go there and everyone's in the same mindset. People are sharing their experiences, and you may have the same conversation with these people. Where are you from? What do you do? How long have you been traveling? Where are you going next? But you're never alone unless you actually take yourself away from a situation and go to your room or go to somewhere by yourself. Then you're alone. So to fear the alone piece, I think it's just being comfortable in yourself and being comfortable being by yourself.
So isn't there something to be said for actually embracing the loneliness?
Agree, yeah. You definitely, yeah. And I would say even back at home as well. So that's travel and just in life in general. So I've always found that I'm an extrovert, so I love socializing. So it's been difficult the last few months without fully socializing. But I also really, really enjoy my alone time and my quiet time, because this is my way to re-energize, focus on myself, and just reflect and on what I want to do, where I'm going, or anything.
So we talked about solo traveling as a sort of having faith in that it'll all sort of work out. But you also talked about moving cities.
Yeah.
So I think it's one thing to go traveling and know that you're coming back home after. Another thing, moving city, changing homes, and going somewhere where you don't really know anyone at all in the city.
Yeah.
I think that's probably more fearless than some of the other things you mentioned. And it can often be a blocker for people because they're unable to realize their full potential because they're stuck in a comfortable home environment. Talk us through some of your experiences moving to new cities without knowing anyone. How did you know that it was going to work out, or whether it was going to be the right move, or whether it was going to be difficult, and all of that?
So I'm from Leicester. So I've lived in Leicester till I was 18. Then I went to university, so lived away. And then straight after university, I got a job up in York, which is north of England. And I had no idea what to expect. I didn't know how it would turn out. I didn't know that's the risk element, right? Moving somewhere, not knowing anyone, it's far from home. And also it's a new job, new environment, new city, new everything. And funnily enough, I don't remember feeling scared or nervous, because actually at the time of moving, I just got back from 3 months of traveling. So I almost felt ready to go to another place and live. And I know what I'm like. I'm quite social. So I thought to myself, I'll make friends. It should be fine. And I was moving in with 3 random people who I met on Facebook, who were also working at the company. And I remember I met them face to face on the day I moved in. And we all became such good friends. We had such a good time. We actually made loads of other friends from our workplace, and it just worked out really well. And then from there, I moved to Carlisle. There was another work opportunity there. So Carlisle is more towards the England-Scotland border. And again, I knew no one there. But this time around, the work place I was at was a lot smaller. So they didn't really have a young workforce or graduates who I could pretty much hang out with. It was a bit different. So moving there, I felt a bit more like, it's even further away from home. I think it was about 4.5 hour drive from Leicester. So it's not like I can just pop home every weekend. So I was thinking, what's it going to be like? How's it going to be? So I remember when I first went there, I also stood out like a sore thumb because there weren't many ethnic Asian people there. So I really did stand out. But again, I moved into a house with 5 other people, and it was a really good time. I made good friends with them all. We hung out, and that's where I really enjoyed my alone time as well. Luckily, the Lake District was nearby, so that worked well as well. We could just go there on the weekends. And then from Carlisle, I moved to Leeds, which is the final destination from that workplace anyway. And again, went there without knowing anyone, but I utilised some of my contacts from York, because York and Leeds are quite close to each other. Luckily, my workplace in Leeds had a few more younger people, so I used to go out with them, and I had a city centre apartment, so everyone used to come to mine before nights out or for dinners or whatever, so just making friends. And what I would say is, when you move to a new place, or what I did especially, is I used apps such as Meetup. Now this app, I don't know if you've heard of it, but it's got different groups on it, so you can connect with other like-minded people and form communities, and they run events. So I made a few friends through apps like that as well. So it almost allows you to do things, because when I move to a new city, I want to explore. I don't just want to sit at home. But at the same time, it's always nice, as much as I like exploring by myself, it's always nice exploring with a group or with friends as well. So I was thinking, how can I do that? So luckily, I made a few friends on apps like that as well, who I actually still speak to now, which is quite nice. So I was there, and then from Leeds, a job opportunity came about in London. So I was yes, let's go to London, because London is more like home for me, even though I'm from Leicester. But all of my mum's side of the family are in London. All of my university friends are in London. All my school friends are in London. I feel it's the hub, right? So I moved to London, and again, that was a risk, because that was a double risk. Firstly, moving to a new city again, but luckily I knew people So I thought this move will be good. But then secondly, moving to a new company. So there's always that fear of, is the grass greener on the other side when you're moving from role to role? So it's almost like, okay, well, the risk is that it may not be as exciting, or what are the work people going to be like? Is it going to be, are they going to make me work weekends or whatever it is? I didn't really know what kind of work environment it would be. So that was a risk in coming. But I thought to myself, it would be a very good move for the stage of life that I was at. So that was in 2017, beginning of 2017. And I've been in London ever since. And thankfully I'm here because I met you.
Let's not make it too soppy now. So something that I think would be really interesting for the listeners is understanding what was going through your mind when you moved into different places. Like, how did you know it was going to work out? How did you know you weren't just going to move to, say, Carlisle and be miserable? And if you get what I mean here, like,
yeah, I think it
is a big risk, especially when you know no one and you're starting a new job. It's like you're having two sort of things to face at once. How do you know it's going to work out? I mean, obviously you never know, but how do you maintain the belief that?
Yeah, and this is it, right? It was my mindset and my self-belief. So I feel through my travels, I have really excelled in me as a person and gained more confidence and independence and everything. So moving around and taking on challenges and taking on risks has become easier for me. I've learned a new kind of mindset to deal with these kind of things. So even now, if if we were like, oh, let's move abroad or let's move here or whatever, I don't think I'd be like, I know I'd do it with you, but it's almost like at the same time, it wouldn't faze me. I'd see it as, oh, it's a new adventure, it's a new opportunity. And that's how I saw each move, because as I said, I'm very curious minded. So I wanted to see, okay, let me push myself. Let me take myself out of my comfort zone and try something different and see what happens. I feel like I perform best, or I'm at my best, when I'm able to grow and make change in my life. So that's what keeps me going. So for me, it was like that mindset piece around, I know everything will be fine. And also, if it's not, then that's fine. I can quit and move home, or I can do, there's always an option. So if things go wrong, there's always a backup plan, right?
You said you're curious minded. What sort of things are you curious in? And I think, as in, like, being curious is an important part of, like, self-development, and improvement, and growth. Talk us through your sort of curiosity practices. Like, what are you interested in and curious about?
So I think, firstly, I was born curious. So when I was in school, my gosh, my classmates probably hated me because I was always asking for more homework. I was looking to learn new things constantly from my teachers. I just love education. Love education. So I love studying. I love exams. That's what I was like. And I kind of still am. So if, I do a lot of reading. And about curiosity, I remember one thing that my brother told me when I was young, because I used to do really well in school. And he said to me, you know what, there's 2 different types of smart. And I was like, okay, what's that? And he said, there's book smart and there's street smart. And he said to me, you're book smart, but you're not street smart. And from there, I was like, oh yeah, okay, I'll show him. And I think the curiosity kind of built from there as well, because I wanted to know, what does that mean? Like, how do you get street smart, book smart, like all of this? And I'm just curious in general. It's something that's through me, something that's just within me. And I'm curious about everything. So I'm curious about, okay, when I go traveling, how do people live? What different cultures are there? Okay, I'm in a village. What happens if there's no electricity? What do they do? What do they eat? Just anything and everything. And that's why I think travel really satisfies my curiosity, because I learn a lot of things. But then also through work, I need it to be challenging. I need it to be fast-paced, moving forward so I can learn. Because if I'm not learning, I just feel stagnated. I just feel like I'm just stood still. So I hate that. That's what I meant, like in terms of taking a risk, making change, going forward, going out your comfort zone. All of this really, it makes me feel fresh and makes me feel like I'm on the right path. Because if I'm not, then I'm just not in a good place.
So how did your curiosity lead you to do chemical engineering and become an engineer?
Oh, well, when I was in school, I was good at science and math subjects, and well, STEM subjects, so that's science, technology, engineering, and math subjects. And because of that, when I was going into university, I actually didn't really know what I wanted to do, but I just knew that these are my strengths. And again, being curious, even in school, I wanted to do a whole range of subjects. You know, when you pick your A levels or even GCSEs, I was like, oh, I want to do history, art, textiles, music. I just want to do everything. And they were there like, okay, you can't pick everything. And even for A levels, I just wanted to do everything. And they said, okay, you can only really pick 5. So I was like, oh, okay, we'll narrow it down.
That annoying girl, right?
Yeah, I am. To be fair, yeah, I think I am, yeah. But to be fair, my classmates were similar to me as well. So I think we all kind of egged each other on, which was good. I was in that environment with like-minded people, which was nice. So I remember, I was strong in STEM subjects, and from there I thought, right, chemical engineering sounds interesting. I didn't really know much about it. I remember when I spoke to my family about it, they were like, yeah, that sounds fine. Like, we don't really know what kind of roles that you can do after, being very engineering focused, but, what is engineering? So I did a bit of research and went to a few kind of lectures and talks around about engineering, and also what universities I can study at, all the open days. And I felt like it was a good fit because the skills you learn as an engineer are very transferable. It's technical, but also there's a lot of kind of problem solving and personal skills, and so it's very transferable. So I thought it would be a good fit to build my future career.
You mentioned there, like, being around a environment of like-minded people. Obviously, with Fearless Females, what you've done is you create a community of like-minded people, and one of the values you've written down is sisterhood. Why is environment, community, sisterhood, being around these like-minded people so important? And what is that one of the core drivers of what you're doing here with Fearless Females, or?
Yeah, so I think with being in a community with like-minded people, you're going to perform at your best because you're all kind of egging each other on, supporting each other and learning from one another. So you're all at that same kind of caliber. And if you're not, that's kind of inspiration to then try what that person's trying, or get advice for someone who's been there and done it. Whereas they'll then be getting advice from someone else who's been there and done it. I feel that we women especially have so much to learn from one another, and we don't always connect as efficiently as we could. So I wanted to form Fearless Females as a community where we can empower each other, where we can learn from one another, we can support each other and discuss topics that nobody really discusses. So things that I still want to learn about as a woman, that I have no idea about, I want to learn. So even the podcast, I feel so inspired when I talk to all the women who have been on the podcast. I just learn so much from them, and just hearing their experiences, it's just really interesting. And I know that it's helped other women as well, because I remember, for example, one of them with my cousin who has an incurable disease. From that podcast, I had quite a few people messaging me saying they also had an incurable disease, but they've never been able to step out and talk about it. So for her to go and do that, have encouraged these women to go and step out and talk to people about it and be open about it, and not be afraid to really reach out as well. So they've almost formed a sub-community within the larger community, and that's gathered like-minded people. So obviously, not something I can relate to, but it's really interesting and inspiring to see these women who have been going through all these different things, and I just want to learn from them. So that's the whole point of this Fearless Females platform.
So it's almost like a growth learning platform that you want to create.
Yeah, absolutely. And a community where it's an open, safe space for us to all discuss any topics that we want. So for me, it's all about asking questions around, and just if one day I'm feeling down, like the other day I was like, right, I need some inspiration. Who can I go to? Let me go to the group. Ladies, I'm looking for some inspiration. Who inspires you and why? And let me just kind of, again, gauge conversations, but also understand who are other people's inspirations and what are they up to? What are they reading? What excites them about life? Where do they want to go? What are their goals? Just anything. I feel like it's really interesting to hear what other women are going through.
What was your trigger to start Fearless Females?
It was actually a book that I read all about careers and growth and performing at your best in your career. And one of the chapters talks about sisterhood. Now, how they've described it is, have a group of friends around you who are a sisterhood who can cheer you on. So they're almost your cheerleaders. So when you want to take a risky move in your career or your life, these people you can discuss it with, and then they can almost be like, yeah, come on, go for it, you can do it. And when you're feeling down, these people are able to then lift you back up. And I thought to myself, I have that. I have a really, really good group of girl mates. We're very close. There's a few of us, and I do that with them, all my female cousins. But then not everybody does. And it's almost like, you know how you say you surround yourself with like-minded people, which I have, but I wanted to expand that out because I want to hear about things that I don't know about as well. So I thought to myself, what can I do? Can I start something? Can I share my experiences and hear about other people's experiences? So I decided to form this Facebook group and invite people in. They then invited other people in. And from there, we've just kind of snowballed into something. And it's really nice hearing these women talk about things and share their experiences, because we're all there to kind of cheer each other on and support each other. That's the key thing, because not everybody has that, right?
And if anyone who's new to listening to this, how can they join the group?
You can join the group. It's on Facebook called Fearless Females, and there's also a podcast called Fearless Females Voice, which is
they're
going to be on that.
They're listening to it already, so maybe put the link in the show notes so people can click into it straight away. Part of the learning, curiosity, and topics you've been speaking about, you mentioned what people are reading. You're starting up a book club in the group. We were talking about it just before we got on air that you're reading your 17th book, I think. 17th?
I think it's 18th
18th
now.
book in 9 months.
9 months,
9 months. So it's nearly a book every other week. Where did that craze start from? And what have been some of your best books you've read?
Ooh, interesting. So that started in March during lockdown. So lockdown happened. I was working from home, had a bit of spare time, and I thought to myself, what can I do? And reading is something which I've done very kind of here and there. So I've never really been that focused in saying, I'm going to read every single day. And I thought to myself, let me challenge myself and try and read for about half an hour to an hour every day. And what I found was when I was reading, it took me into a whole new place. I felt like I was the only person in the room, and I was just focused on that story or what I was reading. So I was almost there with the author or with the character or whatever it was that I was reading. And it took me into this space which I thought, wow, this is amazing, and I want to continue reading. And I have done every day since then, actually. And I'd say some of the books which I've read. So I read Harry Potter, all 7 of them. So some people are going to hate me, but I actually only read up to 4 when I was a child. So I read the rest of the 7, and then we watched the movies after. And more recently, I've read Michelle Obama's book, Becoming, which I thought was incredible. And also Lean In by Sheryl Sandberg, which again was incredible. I'm currently, actually we're going on holiday tomorrow, so I asked for some book recommendations from the Fearless Females Club, and I'm taking with me The Alchemist and The Monk Who Sold His Ferrari. So I bought those 2 books over the last couple of days, which I'll be reading next week whilst on holiday. So some of the books which I've read recently, which I'd recommend and have been really good.
So outside of my book, which has been number 1 of the list.
Did I read your book over lockdown?
Well, you must have, because it came out in May 24th.
Yeah, I did read it again as well. And funnily enough, I'm actually going through the R&T journey right now, so might have to refresh my memory and get that book back in.
Let's not give it too much of a plug here, though. Focus on you. Which is your favorite book? If you had to recommend one book, maybe one fiction, one non-fiction.
Okay, so fiction, I'd say Shantaram. So that's the book I started with. Funnily enough, that's the book I started with, and it's about 1,000 pages long. So I was a bit overwhelmed when I looked at it in March, and I was like, am I actually going to get through this? It took me some time, but I did it. So I'd say fiction, definitely Shantaram. If you haven't read it, it's incredible. It's an adventure story, so it's right up my street. And non-fiction, I'd probably say the book which has really impacted me and made me think differently is Lean In. And that's the book which we're going to be reviewing in the first book club, which is on Monday 14th of December.
And how can people join the book club?
You can join by the Facebook group. So there's an event on the Facebook group. It's a private Facebook group, by the way, and for females only. So you can join
I'm not even allowed in.
Yeah. He's always like, what's going on in the group? And I was like, oh, we can't see. But so you can join through the Fearless Females Facebook group. So yeah, and that's another thing with the book club, because I love reading so much. And when I read, I just want to talk about these books with someone. So I decided to start the book club, because I'm pretty sure there must be other people who are reading and thinking, oh, I want to discuss this book. I've got so many insights on so many of these books, and I've just kind of kept it to myself. So I need another perspective, another opinion, another thought. So that's why this book club's happening.
Well, just sort of switching gears here onto one of the values that I want to speak about that you've mentioned as part of Fearless Females is identity. And identity is something that I think everyone sort of struggles with it on some level, but I think women. I think you were very strategic when you said identity, because you're a strong proponent of women having their own identity and not having it wrapped up in something else, which can often be the case. Can you explain why identity is so important as a woman? Why having your own identity is so important?
So with identity, how I feel is, as a woman, there's so many different elements that can sway your identity, such as being a mother. So then you have your children there, you're a partner, you're a housewife, we're so many different things. We can be so many different things. And having an identity is something for yourself and really knowing yourself. And I think it's really important to know that, or to be grounded, so you have something for yourself. So you're not just kind of engrossed in other things, but you're happy within yourself. Yeah.
Okay. So it's around, even if there was no kids, there's no husband or boyfriend or whatever, no job, you still have your own identity.
Absolutely, yeah. And I think that's something to work on, and it's difficult to just be like, oh, have an identity. It's almost like, what is your identity? Like, if you really think about it and look deep in and see, what are you happy with? What really grounds you? What is it that you want to do? What impact do you want to make? Look at your surroundings. So it's quite an element of it. But yeah.
What's your identity then?
My identity? Interesting. No one's actually really asked me that. Probably say just like a happy woman. I don't really, fiance, we live together, I'm an engineer at the moment, but I wouldn't really say I'm one of those. I just describe it as me as a person and my personality. Like, I'm just...
A fearless female.
A fearless female. There we go. A happy fearless female.
For those listening, tell us what the future of Fearless Females holds, and what would you like to see in 2021 to happen in the community?
Honestly, I'd like to meet firstly some of these women. So I want to start some webinars. I want to also do face-to-faces as and when they're allowed. And that's something that I've had feedback on from some of the women in the group, to say, oh, I'd love to meet that person and have a conversation with them. So that's something which I'd like to test out. And also just to have a really engaged group and have really powerful content in there as well. So yeah, I think they're probably two of the things which I'd be focusing on.
Yeah. And just to wrap up, what is the biggest risk you've taken this month? Well, this year.
This year? Ooh.
You said at the start you defined fearless female as risk-taking, stepping into the unknown, all these big definitions. So
yeah.
Obviously, I'm a massive proponent of practicing what you preach.
Yes.
You've talked about what you've done in the past. What have you done this year?
This year, interesting. So many risks, but one which I'd rather talk about is us moving in together, let's say. So when you're in a relationship, you want to take things to the next level, you can move in together, which is good. And most couples, normal couples, would be like, right, let's rent a place and see how things go. But then we somehow ended up saying, okay, let's just skip past the renting stage and let's just buy a place together. And I remember thinking, we're really solid in what we have. So it's, but there's still always a risk element. We'd never lived with each other. We didn't know each other's real habits. So that happened in Feb time of moving in with someone, and
just before lockdown. So there's any litmus test. That's the one.
Yeah, because I thought to myself, oh, it's fine. I'll have my own escape. I'll be able to go to work, and you'll be working from home, so we'll have our space. But actually, it's just been that both of us have been in the flat, and actually it's worked out really well because we got engaged in August, so it was very good. I think it's helped. Yeah, it's been really, really good. But there's always that risk element, right, of when you're trying to progress the relationship forward. So yeah, we just kind of jumped in and said, yeah, let's just get a place.
Love it. Any final words for the fearless females listening? It's obviously your first podcast where you've been put under the spotlight.
Yes.
All the other episodes you're interviewing other fearless females, but this time you brought the first man into the realm of fearless females. So very honoured to do this. But any final words for the listeners?
I'd probably say join the Facebook group and continue being fearless. If you have any questions or anything you want to discuss, please get in touch. We're all here to help. We're all here to support. And thank you for listening.
Thanks for having me.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for listening to the Fearless Females podcast. Be sure to join our Facebook group called Fearless Females and stay tuned for the next episode. Bye for now.